Do you wake up every day fired up to make a difference? Are you committed to taking your nonprofit to the next level and beyond? I have news for you. Success isn't about hard work or passion. It's about having a smart, scalable strategy in place. Hi, I'm Tom Kelly, your nonprofit catalyst. You may know me as the CEO of Charity Auction Today and Donor Books, or the author of The $1 Million Nonprofit. What I help nonprofits achieve that give them a significant edge and a clear path to substantial growth is the ability to strategically fundraise and effectively engage their community. And that's what I'm going to share with you right here on the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. In each episode, I'm going to take you behind the scenes to reveal the strategies, techniques, and tactics of successful nonprofits so that you can put these into practice immediately to grow your organization. No matter if we are talking about common pitfalls nonprofits make and how to avoid them, exploring how to accelerate your next fundraising campaign, looking at how to attract ideal donors, or everything in between, this conversation is designed to drive your nonprofit forward. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast, your go-to resource for scaling nonprofit organizations. I'm your host, Tom Kelly with Charity Auctions Today. Today, we're joined by Sarah Biller, co-founder of FinTech Sandbox. Get ready for insights and strategies to propel your nonprofit missions forward. Thank you, Sarah, so much for being here today.
Oh, Tom, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, hey, can you tell us a little bit about your journey as co-founder of FinTech Sandbox and what inspired you to start this nonprofit?
Yeah, Tom, thank you. It's such a non-obvious answer, by the way, because FinTech Sandbox is a not-for-profit that works in financial services. So try to explain that to your friendly banker or financial advisor, why not-for-profit works in an industry that works to make money. But FinTech Sandbox, we started it about a decade ago now with my co-founder, David Jagan, specifically to avoid a stall point in the innovation cycle of financial services. As some of you may guess, or you might even guess, Tom, financial services is a data-driven activity. But for an entrepreneur to get their hands on high-quality data to make decisions and build products or services around lending or stock picking or insurance, that data is quite hard to come by. It's costly and it has very extensive procurement processes. I had this challenge in my own startup journey. I had a startup for institutional bond investors. David, my co-founder, was investing in promising fintech companies. And we were seeing together the challenge that existed in a data-driven industry for entrepreneurs who could not get their hands on data for all those reasons.
And what made you register this as a nonprofit instead of a for-profit business?
Yeah, it's that story. If someone had told a bumblebee that they couldn't fly, maybe they couldn't fly, but maybe they would decide rather not to fly. But in our case, we really felt very strongly that a not-for-profit was the right approach to solving these challenges for the financial markets, because we knew we wanted to partner with the most significant, most important data providers in the industry, the likes of like S&P Global or Moody's or at the time, Thomson Reuters, today Refinitiv. And we knew that cost was a burden to the entrepreneurs. And so the way that we bridged that gap with wanting to partner with world-class organizations on behalf of these entrepreneurs who didn't have a lot of money or a lot of time was to find a way to take the commerce out of the question, to make this not initially about the commercial activity of selling data, but the actual eventual use case of it. And so it made oddly perfect sense to us to go to these data providers and ask if they would work with us on behalf of the entrepreneurs for free initially, with the belief that eventually those entrepreneurs, many of them would use the data sets to build new and differentiated products in financial services. And the benefit back to the data provider was that they would have all new use cases, new distribution channels for their data, And we could marry those two together only under a not-for-profit standard. If we looked like we were going to make money as the middle people, neither groups would have worked with us.
Well, and I think with the last name Biller, like going into financial, services is like the right path for you, right?
It does have a nice ring to it. I do have the most perfect fintech name ever. So, yeah.
That's great. So how does FinTech Sandbox support fintech startups, and what makes it unique compared to other accelerator programs?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is that we actually, with intentionality, almost don't want to be an accelerator. We want to be an accelerant. And therefore, we want to make sure that we're unique amongst other organizations that, like an accelerator, that work with entrepreneurs in the sense that we are very singly focused on putting data in their hands so they can build great products. We will surround them with community and where they need it, some help building the infrastructure layer that allows them to easily ingest that data if they don't have it and put it to use. But we're unique in the sense that we believe that the best way to drive innovation forward in financial services is not to be in the way of the entrepreneur, but to be an enabler through data. And so we don't really program aggressively towards this is, how you go to market, or this is what your term sheet should look like. We stick to our knitting and it's working. We've worked with over 300 startups from every continent except for Antarctica. Somebody built a fintech in the winter, cold months, cold places. But it's been a great model for us to think about it, not again through the lens of commerce, but through the lens of innovation.
And in your opinion, what are the key ingredients for a successful nonprofit organization?
Oh gosh, I feel like, Tom, I should ask you that question because you have spoken and really probed the leaders in not-for-profit that have inspired all of us on how we might go forward. In our case, as I just alluded to, one of our most important efforts that we've undertaken is to suspend the belief that not-for-profits don't have a role in an industry that's 3,000 years old and making money or being able to promote the transaction or movement of money. That's number one. There is a role for innovation to happen under new business models, not-for-profit being one for financial services. I think the second is, even with that belief that we can do this in a not-for-profit fashion, still with the rigor of a for-profit company, we manage very tightly our P&L, our management, our close management, because we're funded by significant industry partners who sponsor our work. So making sure that we adopt the rigor of our industry that we all know. And I think the third thing that's been important to us is that we have approached this particular initiative with a spirit of generosity. And I don't think that's atypical for anyone who is seeking to make an impact through a not-for-profit. But for us, it is always remembering, in our case, the true north of our work is the entrepreneur or the innovator, and never losing sight of what they need to succeed and lift up a whole industry through that success.
Yeah, and it's hard. You don't really see, when you think of a nonprofit, you don't necessarily think of a company or a nonprofit that's helping for-profit businesses. You're thinking of nonprofits as helping the needy or have an animal welfare, sanctuary. You don't think of nonprofits as helping other businesses. How has that kind of shifted for you? That just that mindset, and how do people talk to you about that when you're nonprofit but you're servicing a for-profit business?
Yes. I think in the earliest stages, it was a very odd construct, particularly of our industry peers and partners. They couldn't understand why we chose a not-for-profit. And some of them even today are like, why aren't you making money off of this? But I'll answer it a different way. Financial services, as it has become embedded in it's actually not just a financial services application, but technology behind financial services is embedding itself in many other industries that actually solve some of the problems that you're talking about. When you think about the impact on the underserved or the impoverished, one of the best ways we can do that is to enable entrepreneurs who are building financial solutions that go into that segment of society and lift them up. With animal welfare or maybe even water quality, any of those more socially impactful areas are vastly improved if we can remove the friction in the way that they participate in the financial markets. So we look at FinTech not just as an agent for the industry itself, but as an agent for change in almost all industries, and particularly those are adjacent. So we can actually ourselves reconcile this idea that financial services is actually something that does good in this world. And we want to empower the entrepreneurs who are actually making those solutions work through the data sets that we're giving them.
Well, and it also goes to show you that nonprofits come in all shapes and sizes and forms, right?
Right.
And you hit the nail on the head. What you said earlier is, I work with a lot of small nonprofits on just scaling them and growing them. Because my philosophy is no money, no mission. And you need to think and change your mindset of thinking like a for-profit business and having run rates. And there's, your donations there's going to be peaks and valleys. And having those run rates so that you can continue to grow through slow times. And you also need to be paying yourself a salary and be paying a team, because if you're spending more than half of your time working a second job and not focusing on your organization or your mission, like you're missing out on a lot of opportunity to spread your mission. And not to mention, you're most likely going to probably burn out. And so a lot of people are just scared to say, hey, these people donated money to me. I can't take anything in a salary. But I think those people that donated to you would rather you see the organization thrive. And if you have to pay yourself for it to thrive, like thinking like a for-profit is the way to go.
I 100% agree. I also have the benefit of sitting on a number of not-for-profit boards. The discipline of actually treating your not-for-profit and the critical impact it's making like a business owner matters. It matters to its sustainability. It matters to its future, and it matters to the ability for you to scale. I can't understate it, or kind of understate enough how important what you just said, Tom, is to all of us who desire to continue to do good. You have to be able to pay yourself and pay your bills to be able to do that. Yeah.
I was just, we just did a documentary on a small dress boutique nonprofit that's actually local. And, the founder, the lady that ran it, towards the end of our shoot, she's like, oh, I got to go run because I got to go to my job now. And I'm like, oh my God, if you could just sit here and focus on this for the same amount of time you're putting there, you can make enough money to be able to pay yourself the same as salary. And, just provide more of these dresses to these underprivileged kids. And it's like, wow, it's like, but, it's a mindset shift, it's just one thing that eventually, will come around.
It will. And I think if I could just bring it back to why we are so passionate about the work we do is because we work with entrepreneurs who are working with women like that. They're working they're on the other side of supplying that, whether it's like, here's a way to manage your cash flows, because people are afraid of money oftentimes, right? Oh, yeah. So how can you comfortably enable a woman who has a dress shop, presumably that's got a philanthropic bent to it, to have the tools in her hand that she needs to make better decisions, better forecasting of cash flow needs? One of the biggest places that we've seen entrepreneurs step up is in the charitable and donor advised fund areas. So how do you improve the charitable giving experience? How do you make sure that the charities see the flow of donor directed dollars? I mean, that is really important, I feel like, from one philanthropy to another, to make sure that the not-for-profits have the same tools that we have as business people. Yeah,
100%. I started helping, I have for-profit companies, makes very successful in that before helping, the nonprofit space. And I started, all of these groups and that I'm involved with is all entrepreneurs, high net worth individuals. And what I started doing to kind of spread that same message is I help entrepreneurs launch their family foundations so that they can create a family foundation. We basically take care of everything, and then just give them, and really it's their spouses and their kids, the opportunity to basically turn their success, the entrepreneur's success, into significance, and creating significance for the spouse and the kids. And just a quick story, like my wife was a stay-at-home mom. My youngest daughter's 8, and my wife is like, she was a school teacher. She's like, well, now our youngest isn't giving me the hugs anymore. She's off going out with friends. Like, I don't know what to do next with my life. And she started to think like, all right, what is my purpose? What am I going to do? Like, I don't want to go back to teaching. Like she was lost for a little while. And so when we formed our family foundation, it like sparked a new thing in her, and she's all lit up. She's now manages and runs our family foundation. And my daughter, when all of my kids get to pick a charity that they give money to that speaks to their heart. I mean, the biggest thing for an entrepreneur is you don't want to raise entitled kids, right? And so by having this family foundation, the first time my daughter decided to give a check to a nonprofit, it was a complete surprise to the lady that was running the nonprofit, but she hands her the check and the lady starts crying and she gives my daughter a big hug, and then my daughter's crying. And I knew right there, I'm like, oh, my daughter's going to be changed forever. Like this moment right here just spoke to her heart, and hopefully she just is a giving person from now on. But it definitely is a big thing, especially for entrepreneurs that there's just so much risk with having, money and kids and no purpose. And you just want to make sure you're providing your family with a path of success and not one of potential failure.
Yeah. Tom, I love that story. I relate to it very much. My dad, just like your dad, a girl dad, my dad, a girl dad, he used to, when I would get up in the morning as a child, he would be like, what good are you going to do today? And that just sticks with, it will stick with her, as you said, forever. She'll know the power that she feels, that she can lift others up. And I think that's really, what a great lesson that we can offer. And each of us have our own special gifts, right? I happen to be a weirdo math girl, so I can help you figure out how to do math. Do you know, your wife is a teacher. She has the ability within her mindset to intellectually align with people's needs, because that's what teachers do, right? They figure it out. We have to empower others in our society to feel good because they're doing good. And that's what I just heard you say. And I think it's a really cool moment. And so how do we make sure that anyone who wants to have a not-for-profit has this same foundation that you just offered your own family? Yeah.
One of my, when I'm interviewing these nonprofits is, I love that question of like, when was that time that you just wanted to give up? Because everybody has that, like, they got kicked in the gut and, they were financially ruined and they wanted to give up, but they kept pushing forward. And then now their nonprofit's a success. And so many people just give up at that point. And they might have, if they would have just stuck with it, they would probably have a thriving organization now. And it's just changing the way that you think a little bit. And, again, I hate to say this, but it circles back to thinking like a for-profit business to help your mission go forward. But it's one of those questions I love to find the backstory from these founders and just like, tell me that situation where I was talking to this firefighter that he runs it's called Project Fire Buddies, and he works with other firefighters that will go to houses that have kids with terminal illnesses and like spend the day with them. And he was telling this story. I just interviewed him a week ago, And he was telling a story about how they were financially, like him and his wife put all their money into the organization. They didn't know what to do. And he's sitting at the firehouse on the edge of his bed, like yelling at God, like, what do you want me to do?
Right.
And the next day he gets a donor that basically funds for the entire year of the organization and kept him going. And it's like, thank you. You listened. And now it's a thriving organization helping, hundreds and hundreds of kids. And I love those stories because everybody has it. And it's just that I powered through and now our organization, it's just like entrepreneurs with their business. Everybody gets kicked in the gut and you just got to keep pushing forward.
That's true. And I think the other thing you just mentioned, Tom, which is relevant to our work at FinTech Sandbox, but I have a feeling to the firefighter and to you and other individuals that you talk to in the nonprofit space, is this idea that like, I embrace this problem as my own. Like I'm going to shake my fist at the universe because I want to figure it out. And there is a way forward. When you're trying, my honest observation as an entrepreneur too, beyond in the not-for-profit space, is that when you're trying to do something absolutely ridiculous and crazy, but do it for the good of others. Like in my case, I wanted to prevent another credit crisis, as crazy as that sounds. People step up and they want to help you. And it's okay to say out loud, I could use some help, whether it's in going to your local bank and getting financial literacy, to your point, sharing the story about, sitting at the edge of your bed and saying, I've done everything I can and I don't want to give up this burden of helping others. That's a pretty cool story. I'm going to have to remember it, that I can see a firefighter in my mind on those days when I'm like, oh my God, not another day.
Enough of my stories here.
Oh, I love it.
So, what strategies do you recommend for nonprofits looking to establish strong partnerships with industry leaders and institutions, especially for like what you've done with FinTech Sandbox?
Yeah.
What are some strategies you have for nonprofits?
In our case, it's one of the foremost things that we've had to focus on because it hasn't come naturally, and we've sought expertise here, is to tell the story about FinTech Sandbox. I mean, most people, if you're in this work, you don't like to talk about yourself. Obviously, you're not standing on the corner, banging the cymbal saying, look at what good I'm doing. That might fail you. I think not. I think one of the strategies that we've tried to do is make sure that everyone feels comfortable telling their own story. And I would encourage others to do that in a humble but substantive way. Otherwise, how will the partners ever find you or know where there's alignment? And so the work you and I started on the call before we recorded, complimenting you on the idea that you have a podcast that lets people tell their story. That's a rarefied moment. And I think everyone who is a leader in not-for-profit should take that opportunity. Be unabashed in telling the good you're doing and the problems that you're solving in a way that invites others to come to you. So I think that's one of the things that we figured out a little bit later at FinTech Sandbox, but has become a critical differentiator in our own operating resiliency and the partners coming to us as opposed to having to go out to them.
Yeah, I think storytelling is such a big part of it because that's how people, build that connection with you and with the organization is through storytelling. And what I've found by interviewing, hundreds of organizations is as soon as the ones that have the biggest social media following, which ultimately results in the, a lot with the biggest donor base, is they're very good storytellers on social media. And they're telling the good stories, but they're also telling the bad stories. Yeah. And they're basically bringing the human element of being like, hey, I screwed up, and it's okay. And people want to see that. They don't want to see all the roses, they want to see the good, the bad, the ugly. And, if you can share that with people, it just kind of builds that relationship with them. And then eventually you got loyal followers that will follow you, through everything.
Yes, for sure. I mean, no one has a linear approach to success in this business. As you said, you hit these valleys, these troughs, these contracted cash flow statements where you've got $2 in the bank. Do you know? I mean, everyone does. So it's okay. And I go back to that adage. I think I've found the more you tell people what good you're trying to do, and not in a bragging way, but in an inviting way, the more people will feel a moment that they can step forward and help. Mm-hmm. Whether it's donors, it's new participants in your not-for-profit. I think the other thing is it's hard for people to ask for help.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a part of being vulnerable, right? And being authentic and just, trusting that everything will work out and not having an ego, I guess, when it comes down to it too. Yeah. So
that's an excellent point.
What are some of the common misconceptions about starting and scaling a nonprofit organization, and how have you navigated these challenges with FinTech Sandbox?
Such a really good question. I think our core challenge is the one that I opened up with, is there was some oddity to us deciding not to provide a commercial solution into an industry that is obviously commercial. It's transactional. That's not true for others in the nonprofit world. But I think we had to, obviously think very substantively about how we would address and respond to that question. I think that might also be true, frankly, of individuals whose not-for-profit is kind of on the thread. There's only one or two people supporting these things. You do have to confront the challenge of your partner, your donor, your granting organization, do they see you as a sustainable organization? If I donate $25,000 or $100,000 to your organization today, will you be here tomorrow to deploy it in a way in which we've talked about? And so I think there is, again, I feel like I'm a broken record today, but going back to that idea of, operating security, really being able to make sure that you are close to the way that your organization runs and needs funding. So I think those are some of the challenges that we oftentimes face too when you're trying to do good.
What advice would you give aspiring nonprofit founders or entrepreneurs looking to make a meaningful impact in their respective industries?
Yeah. Tom, you said a word earlier, and I have to underscore it. I was going to do it a little bit later, but I'll do it now. Purpose. We are so void of purpose today. But if you have it, or you something tickles at you, a problem you want to solve, just go figure out how to solve it. Just like you do if you're in the business world or in the startup world. I'm from rural West Virginia. That's a place where there is no shortage of problems. And what I've been often amazed at is how the community bands together to come around a problem once somebody can articulate what it is. And that to me is purpose. You as an individual who kind of feels it in your heart, you want to do something in the not-for-profit, you must figure out how to define it so others can come along, because they will. But I think that to me is sort of what we need today more than anything, for anyone who wants to have an organization that drives impact. And that is having to figure out what your own purpose is and define it in a way that it helps others join you in this mission. It's pretty lonely at first. People think you're crazy, and they're like, really? You want to go? You want me to bring trash bags and go walk 5 miles with you down this road and pick up cans? Until you remind people that for that effort, when you look back and you see what you've done and you see that pristine roadside and that joy and laughter you all had, it is meaningful to others. And so I think that's the guidance I would think about, is what is it that, and you use the word, Tom, and it's so important here. What is your purpose in life? And once you define it, go after it. Yeah, I like how you say it. You almost have to, once you define it and go after it, like call your shot.
tell people about it, because that's how you're going to get people. Like, you might have it's just like an entrepreneur. We're going to circle back to that, right? They might have the best invention, the best business idea, but unless they start taking action, it's just an idea. It just lives inside your head. It's the same thing once you find a purpose and you want to fix or change something. Call your shop, post it on social media, see if anybody, and just say, hey, who's coming with me? And see who raises their hand and says, I'll go with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people will be surprised. I mean, I know we were surprised. I mean, I'm tickled beyond belief that you and I are actually getting to have this conversation, because we called our shot. We said, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And people came along.
So how do you define success for FinTech Sandbox?
Yeah, it's actually easy and hard. So success is the entrepreneurs who come to us for access to data. Very simple. That's it's a metric. We can measure it. We curate who comes because we want to make sure they can use it. We measure our success, not that we're regional or national in the United States, but we actually have global influence. Because when you push out into these corners of the world that are non-traditional financial services centers, for lack of a better way to talk about it, those are the entrepreneurs who are Main Street, who are in their villages in Ghana, who were really advancing the ball forward to using financial services for good. And so our measurement begins to be like, gosh, how much impact are we having in serving what is a globally interconnected industry? And then bringing it back in and saying, gosh, now how do we introduce those entrepreneurs to the partners who can help them advance and get scale and do this more broadly? So we have a little bit of a multidimensional approach. And I guess the third thing I would say is that we never forget that our partners make it possible. And so we really look at success in the measurement of how well they are satisfied with their decision to allow us to facilitate the use of their data for good.
What role do you see technology playing in the future of nonprofit organizations, and how can a nonprofit leverage technology to enhance their impact?
I mean, I'm a firm believer, obviously, in the power of technology. I like to move a little money towards technology to make that, obviously. But I think there's no better place for the productivity enhancements, the breadth of even just improving the experience for the individuals or the entities you're trying to solve than a nonprofit leader understanding the power of technology in their own role. I've talked a little bit selfishly about the role of technology in the financial services world to help not-for-profit leaders have stronger, more resilient, more literate financial decisions. Take advantage of mobile banking, take advantage of these tools that let you really manage more effectively the strength of your organization, but more holistically, generative AI today. Is there, can you use it as a tool where people who are trying to understand what you're doing actually have an iterative interaction on your website when you can't be there? And so I think the same ways that we think about technology in the business world, enhancing productivity, and making, helping you make better decisions, the not-for-profit world has to keep up with that, has to deploy it. And because it broadens your reach and makes you more efficient.
Yeah. And I think especially for smaller nonprofits that are still running on Excel spreadsheets and, have all these things going on. It's like, I'm all about like buy back your time so that you can focus on the mission and not be spending it all on accounting or, donation, tracking or donor letters. Like, there's so many low cost solutions that will automate a lot of that for you and utilize the latest technology. And don't be afraid of AI. Like I use AI for everything, like ChatGPT for this and that. Like a lot of people are so scared of this technology, but man, it can really help propel you. And my biggest thing that I see all the time is just burnout. Like they're just so burnt out. Like we're spending all of our life savings and I'm working 3 jobs and we're trying to, provide this good impact in the community. And like, we just can't do it anymore. And it's like, well, that's why we got to change that mindset and let's start, implementing some of these tools that will buy back your time so that you can focus on the mission.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's the difference between, sort of operating activities and strategic. Where are you better as a founder, as a leader? Yeah. You're better in the strategic. We all are, if that's your purpose. And so I agree. And I think, one idea that maybe we need to investigate is how can your podcast begin to help educate? Mm-hmm. Use this as a moment for all of us to learn about what is, like you just said, I use ChatGPT. I want to say how. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just because this is that moment for all of us. Technology is just not for the for-profit world.
So, last question, what's next for FinTech Sandbox? What are you excited about developing? What can we expect to see in the future?
It's a fantastic question because it's relevant to what we just talked about. David and I had this really interesting dialogue across the past year. And the question was, after 10 years of operating FinTech Sandbox, are we still relevant? I think every not-for-profit also has to ask that question. Like, are you still, the way you deliver your services, the impact you're trying to make, are you relevant in a rapidly changing world? And no surprise, we said yes. Get up another day to fight because the application of data, just what we just talked about, Tom, you're using ChatGPT. That itself, right, is an analytic capability and emerging technology sitting on a big layer of data. So we know that for us, the next cycle, the next 10 years of innovation in our category is going to come because we figure out how to put data in the hands of entrepreneurs that's more robust and rigorously interrogated, and importantly, free of bias. And that's an area that we are deeply committed to, is making sure that we've democratized the availability of this critical input to their work. But we've done it in such a way that we're not doing harm, because right now, and I think everybody understands this, AI still is not perfectly explained. There's a portion of it that's unknown. And so we want to make sure that at FinTech Sandbox, we're the agents that also help put data out that is free of all of those sort of challenging things we might think about when you're using emerging technologies in something that's important as financial services.
So how can people find out more about you? How can they get involved? What's the best way to reach and get in touch with you?
Thank you, Tom. We are super friendly and collegial, obviously. The enthusiasm for what we do, I hope, comes through to the listeners. I would encourage everyone to go to fintechsandbox.org. We have on our website lots of information about our data program, which we call a data access residency program, as well as the entrepreneurs. You might not have a lot of listeners who are building financial services technology applications, but you may have some in your audience who are very interested in how they can get to that next generation of technology that you encouraged everyone to tap. So we're happy to help in either way, get them data and or help them see where there's emerging technologies that can be useful. We're very community oriented too. And so we strive a lot to do programming that is free. And so encourage, just sign up at fintechsandbox.org. We will not spam you, but we'll share with you opportunities to learn about the emergence of new technologies.
Well, Sarah Biller with FinTech Sandbox, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and your insight today.
Tom, thank you. I'm going to leave us inspired by you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. You're here. That means you're ready to take your nonprofit to the next level and make a greater impact. Come visit realtomkelly.com/playbooks to download free playbooks that your nonprofit can use today to start scaling to $1 million in donations. Plus, so much more. Catch the new behind-the-scenes insights on the next episode, and until then, here's to the impact you will make. I'm Tom Kelly. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and encourage others to listen.